My name is Adam Bleibtreu, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Creative Circle. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning, and we're going to have a panel run about 30 minutes plus or minus, talking about industry insights and really focused on digital innovation and careers. We have three great panelists with us today, as well as two of my staff working behind the scenes, Jackie and Rita. From time to time, you'll hear me ask them to change slides, etc. So you'll know who they are. I encourage you to use either the chat function or the Q&A function during this morning's conversation. Ask us questions. We will do our best to get them in front of the panelists so we can make this as close to an interactive conversation as possible. As part of the registration process, you all asked us questions in advance, so we're going to start this morning's conversation with some of those, and then we'll just see where the conversation takes us. Jackie, if you'll change the slide, we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do and how we're going to structure this, and then we'll just get started with introductions, and away we go. We want to talk a little bit about a career, answer some questions, how to get into and what the career of digital innovations is. It's quite a broad category, and we want to help find some focus and narrow that down. We want to talk a little bit about trends in the industry, how things have evolved over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. Obviously, we want to be able to give you some insight into hiring. You're going to have the opportunity to listen to folks who are senior professionals in the industry and have done quite a bit of reviewing and hiring in their careers. And I think it's incredibly helpful to listen to their perspective and how they go about making those kinds of decisions. And then, time permitting, we'll get into a couple more of Q&A with you guys. We've got a couple of resources that we'll put up on the screen and give you the opportunity to take a screenshot. I'd like to remind you again, we are utilizing the chat or the Q&A function, so feel free to use those two windows to communicate with us. We are recording this, and once we get it recorded and edited down, you will get an email from us alerting you to where you can go review it again. You can share it with your friends, etc. So with that said, let's meet the panel and let's get started. We have with us today Christine Cravens, Nick Hamilton, and George Sanchez. Rather than have me talk to you about their backgrounds, we're going to start with Christine. We'd like to learn a little bit about you and, most importantly, welcome you to the conversation.
Great, thanks for having me today. So I am Chris Cravens. I manage product design and user research within the Kroger company. Kroger is the largest traditional retailer for grocery here in the U.S. and the third largest for grocery e-commerce. And so I work on a lot of our e-commerce initiatives, including on like how our associate experiences help serve our customer, and then also helping to lead research to make sure we're understanding our customers and then the needs of our associates who are serving the customers. And I've been in the user experience and digital industry for over 20 years now. And I've worked across a range of with agency environments, startups, as well as corporations across different industries. And I've also been leading the Cincinnati, Ohio chapter of the Interaction Design Association for the last 10 years. Thanks for having me today.
Wow, what a pleasure to have you, and what a great background. There's a lot of questions I want to ask you. Nick, could we learn a little bit about you?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Hamilton. I am the head of creative services, director of brand design at Fifth Third Bank. Been with the bank for about 10 years. My team works on everything pretty much except TV. We'll have input, but we have an agency that does that, but we'll work on everything else, social, print, digital, you name it, we work on it. Before that, I spent my career in the agency side of things. Spent a lot of time in the CPG world, also print, so lots of experience, and looking forward to answering questions and hopefully helping some of you on your journey.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Again, really interesting background. George, welcome to the panel, and talk a little bit about yourself if you don't mind.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for the invite, and hello to Chris and Nick. Yes, I'm George Sanchez, and I'm head of brand partnerships at Hetty. And Hetty is a mobile product consultancy based in Brooklyn. And we like to say that we build sustainable innovation through design and technology. And basically what that means is we help startups and Fortune 500 brands design and build new mobile products or apps from the ground up. And we also actively manage apps on behalf of our clients through product design, product management, and engineering. In terms of my background, it's a little bit different than the folks on the panel, but I had a 10-year career on Wall Street and in investment banking. And during the last financial crisis, I made a transition to design and digital. So I've spent my time in various agencies, ran my own consultancy, and currently am at Hetty.
Fantastic. Really appreciate the three of you being here. George, you're in Vermont, if I'm not mistaken, and Nick and Chris, you guys are based in Cincinnati. So we've got, and I'm in Los Angeles, so we clearly have the US covered today. One of the questions that I always have is really what it's like to sit in your chair, right? Like, what is a little bit about your day to day? If I were to walk into your office and sort of hang out in the corner for a bit, back when you went into an office and now obviously all of us working from home. Nick, you run basically an in-house agency. So can you just give us a little insight into what that's like?
Sure. Crazy. Always busy, always something going on. You know, I have one of those jobs, I guess, where I'm driving into work or not driving in anymore, but, you know, planning my day. This is what I want to get done today. And it rarely happens. You know, there's always a curveball, a fire, you know, with a team and managing the brand and trying to do all the things it is that I do. There's always, like I said, a fire, curveball, something keeps it interesting. Yeah, just juggling a lot of balls.
How big a team do you manage?
7.
Got it.
7. So we have some print design, digital design, copywriting. Lean and mean.
Great. In your world, what's a day in the life like? What's it like sitting in your chair?
Is that still me?
Chris.
Hi.
Chris, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. The question was what a day in life is for me. Is that correct?
Yeah. What's it like to sit in your chair for a day?
Yeah, I'd say it's 3 different focuses. So one is managing my team, like ensuring that they have what they need to succeed, and helping like to guide them and grow their career paths. Another piece is partnering closely with our product management and technology partners as we are working to like solve different problems for like our customers and associates, and from the upfront like strategizing on how we're going to approach a problem, and going like helping to facilitate discovery sessions that can help us like ideate and to kind of take advantage of everyone's like different expertise and collaboration that they can bring to the table. So helping to like facilitate and bring forward like discovery sessions, and then also like looking at like how our initiatives fit into like kind of the bigger picture of the company, and how we can just continue to grow like the offerings that we're giving to our customers, like in the digital space, continue to innovate and meet their needs.
Wow. So a lot of time really in trying to create and manage environments that foster creativity, development, exploration.
Yes, we're always trying new techniques. I think I've been really inspired at Kroger that there's like a big focus on our customers and how we can continue to solve their problems. And I think that really helps inspire like a lot of creativity. And like part of our role, like I see is in user experience, is just helping people to like understand the audience that we're designing for, and really create that empathy that can help like get those creative juices flowing for everyone.
Got it. And George, in your world, what's a day in the life of George Sanchez?
Yeah, in a brand partnerships position, it's two-sided. So the first part is looking at new opportunities, either startups or established brands, understanding what their business problem is, and then putting my colleagues in the best light and putting them up on a pedestal and trying to take the right tools in my toolkit, which are design, product strategy, or engineering, and figuring out what mix of those do we need to apply for any given business problem that we're trying to solve for. On the other side, brand partnerships mean there's an ecosystem that exists around a mobile app, different technologies, different marketing technology that you can implement into a mobile product. And so I'm always doing outreach to those different vendors and seeing which make the most sense for our roster of clients. So it's a pretty enviable position. I sit on and see a lot. So it's a really great position.
Interesting. And a lot of market-based evaluation conversations with clients about how the reaction to the products you've developed are going.
Absolutely. So we're always looking at, what is going on, not just at the client, but in the industry, and then other competitive products, and trying to bring as much insight as we can, inclusive of, user research and insights that we might glean there that maybe just haven't been brought to light to them in the past.
Fantastic. So Chris, one of my favorite questions is around the evolution of your career. And if you don't mind me asking, I'd love to learn a little bit about what you think one of the best decisions you've made along the way in your career, and also one that maybe you regret.
It's a great question. I'd say the best decision I made was I started my career in magazine journalism, and I was in that for about 4 years from when I graduated from college. And I really was attracted to like digital and getting involved in like moving more into like being a digital designer, which is where I discovered user experience. And I really think that was the best decision I made. Like a lot of the reasons that I got into journalism, that I was intrigued by people and how they think and what their lives are like, I felt like was a great transition to user experience, like where I was like kind of working to even serve them and help people in like an even more meaningful way, and just how much like digital keeps changing. It's been a like really exciting to see how much it's evolved over the years. So I'd say that was the best career decision I made. I got in it early when things were still big and figured out in a lot of ways. So it was fun to be like an early kind of pioneer when websites were first being developed. And standards were still pretty much in their infancy. I'd say probably one of the things I would like look back and regret is there was a time in my career where I got laid off when half of my company was sold, and I think I rushed into like another getting into a position. I like kind of put too much pressure on myself to take something quickly, where I probably should have like stepped back and made sure it was like the best like culture fit for me before I jumped right into it. But it all worked out in the end.
Thank you. Really, really insightful. Nick, you've been running sort of this shop for a bit of time, and I'm really interested in how you've seen things evolve from 2 or 3 years ago to today, and really in this sort of user experience and digital world. What big changes have you seen?
At least for us, it's keeping up with the technology in the different platforms and how to get our message out. Everything these days, it's motion, it's animation, it's video. Just trying to stay current and, moving away from print, which we still do a little bit, but, doing more of that movement, that video, and how to create content constantly. There's always a need for new content. And it's got to be relevant content. And trying to, it's that, just like the news, it's a 24/7 cycle of trying to, constantly develop and like I said the word relevant because that's, bad content in front of a customer, you're better off not putting anything in front of them.
Right.
So it's trying to develop that meaningful content, but it just never stops.
Yeah, it's a beast that keeps consuming input.
Or in the past, I guess, to answer your question, maybe, I don't know, about a couple years ago, but you might put something out and then you could take a breath, and think about what's the next thing. And there was a little more time where now it's just constant, just
right.
So.
Oh, I have a career that dates back to magazine advertising, and you could take 2 or 3 weeks to put an ad together, air it, so to speak, and then enjoy the reaction to it. And now that all takes place in about the time of this conversation.
Yep.
George, we're talking today really about this concept or this category of digital innovation. And I'd love your perspective on defining a little bit about UX, UI and the evolution of those as disciplines.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in the early 2000s, we saw specialization be something that was very trendy. You saw graphic designers converting themselves into UX, UI designers. And then you saw designers put overweight on UI and have that as their starting point from a schooling perspective. And I think what we're seeing now, and the word is thrown around a lot, but looking for that design unicorn, which is marrying UX, UI, and visual into one, where you can be a designer that can work from concepting all the way through to execution. Designers, which makes me happy, have more of a seat at the table now, because you just can't fall down on any type of brand experience, whether that's on your website or in your branded mobile app. So you're starting to see more formalized titles like product designer and service designer, which I think starts to combine all three of these disciplines. So I think that is the trend. It's just further maturing of the role and design getting closer to the business.
Thank you. Very helpful. Chris, we hear terms UX, UI, customer journey, and I'm wondering from your perspective, if you can give us your version of UX versus UI and how they impact the customer's journey.
Yeah, it's a great question because I think the two get confused a lot in the industry. I see user experience as the practice of really ensuring like the who you're designing for, like who your target audience is part of like your design process from the very beginning, like ensuring like you're understanding them through research, and then like iteratively including user input throughout like your design process. And so I think it's as George was saying, like that service design piece and like that upfront having that seat at the table to be there with the ideation to like help the team like really stay focused on the user and ensuring that that is carried through. I think user experience like really helps from a strategy standpoint, like ensuring that we're like truly serving the needs of the customer and going beyond like what they're even telling us to like what they're thinking and feeling, and how that empathy can be created an experience. And I think there's a lot of like upfront planning when it comes to user experience, like thinking through priorities of communication and how like people's like mental models are gonna interact, where UI or like user interface design is thinking through like that presentation layer of the experience, and often like a digital experience. So ensuring it's on brand, ensuring it's following like usability best practices, and like really helping a person's like eye that they can like accomplish what they're there to achieve. And so it's more of like the UI is like that front end presentation layer and like that usability piece. And for many companies too, it's like using like a design system or a way that like you can really create like that consistent experience for users. And you said customer journey as well, right?
Yeah, no, really helpful. And what in the organizational structure at Kroger, where does this sort of digital innovation team, where do you sit in the corporate structure?
Yeah, so we have a group department I'm a part of called Kroger Technology and Digital, and we are focused on like the customer experience and the customer interactions, like on the site and the app or e-commerce, and then just like how digital like extends to other parts of like the customer, whether like how they're paying or their in-store experience and how digital can extend to that. And then we also support like the associate side of things, like how the associate is supporting the customer and like enabled by technology. And so we're a department within the organization. We are encouraged to innovate, and we incorporate like design thinking into a lot of like our early approaches to our work. And so we're innovating on like a day-to-day basis, like looking at like new technologies and like thinking through the user. And then there's also other parts of the company that are focused on like pure innovation, like kind of thinking fast forward to the future and like how can we stay ahead with emerging technologies.
Thank you. Incredibly helpful. I'm never sure how all the pieces fit together. Nick, you were talking earlier about sort of how you turn on the machine and it generates content. And what I'm wondering is, in the world you manage, how has analytics changed your day-to-day? My perception is 3 or 4 years ago, analytics was something that the finance team used to define budgetary components and revenue and whatnot. And do you now rely on analytics in a way to measure the impact of content that you?
Absolutely. I mean, it frankly, it makes our jobs a lot easier because we know what's successful, what's not successful. And you know, it's fairly instant, some of the reaction you get. So yeah, we rely a lot on analytics. And go ahead, you're gonna ask them.
Do you have an analytics team as part of yours that you manage, or do you leverage from somewhere else?
We sit within the marketing department. That's a separate group, but we, you know, constantly talking to one another.
Got it. Thank you, George. Two-part question for you. The first is, what role does analytics play in how you help manage and develop applications for the products that you guys develop? So a little bit about your perception on analytics would be great. And then I want to come and talk to you about remote management. So a little bit about analytics, if you guys value it and how you approach it.
Yeah, I think it's the next evolution, I think, in product management, which is there's so many tools out there. Much like you know, Adam, as the CMO, how many MarTech platforms there are you can use. The same sort of ecosystem exists within the mobile world, and we use analytics all the time, right? Because we're constantly iterating on our products for our clients. So understanding lifetime value of a customer, understanding conversion rates, understanding where in the customer journey within an app customers are getting hung up. You know, maybe it's the checkout, right? And why are users falling off at the checkout? 50% of the time? And if we can increase that to 70%, what does that mean for the bottom line? All those things, especially since most of our apps are money makers, any small positive change in one of these metrics can have a profound impact. So the answer is yes. The tools are there, and you need to leverage them.
And then I want to go around to all three of you. We all manage people, and we spend a large portion of our careers in managing people in teams. And if there's one thing you've learned about managing a team remotely, right? Like, what's the key thing we've learned as professionals over the last 90 days? So Chris, I want to start with you, and then Nick will follow up after that. But Chris, if there's one thing you've learned about managing people remotely.
I think it's taking the time to have more build a relationship with people. And when you're in the office with people beside you, it's easy to have side conversations and stop by and ask about how people are just doing in general. I think going to being remote now, and everyone's remote, it's just making sure to take time, whether it's giving people a quick phone call or we use Microsoft Teams and just sending a quick message to check in and making sure you spend time to thank people and appreciate them as well, because when you're kind of working from home and by yourself, you're isolated in a way. So it's just making sure to spend that time to bring that social component in.
Really helpful. Nick, what key thing have you learned over the last 90 days in managing your team remotely?
Right. It took, when we left, it was pretty abrupt. It was just, pretty much go home. There wasn't, I think that was pretty much for everybody. There wasn't a week or something to plan for it or build up. Everybody just kind of left. So it took us a little while to find our rhythm. But once we did, I think I could argue we're more productive now than we were, in the office. There's less distractions and we can focus more. As far as being remote, I, as a manager, try to stay in contact with my team as much as possible. Instead of just email, encourage, let's talk on the phone. Even if you have a question, give me a call or I'll call you, instead of just sending an email or a jabber or whatever. And I also try to, we've been doing these every other week Zoom meetings where we'll call them happy hours, but just seeing each other's faces, and it sounds like a simple thing, but when it happens, it's just good to see everybody again, and just trying to stay in touch through voice and face as much as possible, instead of just communicating via email or text or whatever.
Yeah, I was not a Microsoft Teams fan until the pandemic went home.
Right.
And Chris,
Right.
I would agree with you. 60% of my job when I'm in the office is wandering by people's offices and checking in on them and how they doing. And I think Jackie and Rita would both tell you, if they were as part of the panel, that they probably enjoy the fact that I don't bug them so much and they are more productive. But I think the social piece we forget. George, within your group, how do you guys handle, how's the remote piece going?
We're in an envious position because this is the way we operated before COVID, which was teams or folks were encouraged to work from home. We do have a team, engineering team in India, so there needs to be overlap in the morning. So a lot of people were working from home as it was. I think what I've been seeing is that culture translates, Adam, when, if you have a strong culture in the office, I've seen that translate to work from home, where people proactively are reaching out to me and, want to do one-on-ones. We're all active on Slack and making jokes. So that's been a nice surprise. In fact, the fact that we do all our meetings on Zoom means that actually I'm talking to different members of my team more often. So in a way, it's solidified our culture, brought us a little bit more together, and just leveraging what we were doing already.
Great. I want to take a moment and really thank the audience, so to speak, those are the participants that are out there. You're asking some phenomenally intelligent questions, and we're going to run a little long. I hope that's okay with the panelists. We'll go another 10, 15 minutes or so if everybody can hang out. We're going to try to get through as many of your questions as you can. We're also going to keep track of them, and I'm going to reach back out to the panelists after this to try and get a little follow-up and some answers for them, because we really want to try to get you as much information as we can. When we get additional answers, we'll post them as part of the recorded videos. So be patient. We will get through as many of them as we can. And we'll go into a little more of a rapid fire piece here so we can sort of work our way through here. George, you mentioned earlier this concept of a design unicorn. Could you give a quick definition of that?
The design unicorn?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what I'm thinking about product designers, because that's what our team hires for, which is, looking at, if you're talking about UX, and Chris can speak to that a little bit more often, but being able to run, a user research or set up a user research engagement or discovery engagement, which questions to ask, understanding that you're going to be taking those insights and then, coming up with concepts or prototypes based on those insights. And then you're going to be designing to those, adding visual elements, adding, even motion and interactive elements, and then carrying that all the way through and being able to sell it through to the client, I think is where I speak to when I think about a design unicorn, as opposed to being a specialist in UI or brand design or a brand designer, or identity designer, or strictly a UX researcher. If you want to be a design leader, that's probably the more appropriate word, not unicorn. I think you have to start to think about all of those different disciplines and how they interact, and then also trying to be even more in tune with the business than maybe designers have been in the past, and being able to sell that through.
Got it. Thank you. Nick, a couple of questions around the hiring process, and
Sure.
I'd welcome your thoughts. And again, it comes back to having the opportunity to be in your office, so to speak. What do you look for when you have the opportunity to look for a new hire? What are portfolio characteristics, resume characteristics? What are the key things you look for in a new hire?
Yeah, for me, there's that old adage, or, I heard it a few years ago, that you make your hiring decision within the first 30 seconds, whether you're going to hire that person or not. And I've seen some, maybe it's 5 minutes, but it is fast. So, the portfolio obviously needs to be there. The resume, I want to see quality work. I want to see your experience. But for me, it's really the person and trusting that person. And I know that sounds maybe a little, like table stakes or cheesy or whatever, but it really is, for me, when I look back on my hires and the people who are still with me and successful, it's, I knew really quickly there was I felt comfortable with them. They felt comfortable with me, and I need to trust this person. And, I'm going to spend a lot of time with them. I'm going to give them assignments. I know they, I need to trust that they're going to do what I ask them to do. So I guess my advice there, based on that, would be to just, be yourself, be your best self, but be yourself. I know you can go into interviews nervous and maybe you try to be somebody a little different, or a little more funny than you actually are, or a little more cooler than you are, whatever. Be yourself. And if you don't get the gig, that's fine. You probably didn't want that gig anyway. Just go in there, be yourself, build that trust, with me, the interviewer. And that trust also shows confidence. That I want to see, not somebody who's nervous. And so really, for me, it's less about, I know it's not like the portfolio is not important. It is, obviously, but there's a lot of people in the agency world out there. I shouldn't say a lot, but there are some people in the agency world who are just super talented, but their people skills aren't so great. And sometimes it's tolerated, the lack of people skills, because they're so crazy talented. I necessarily don't do that. I mean, I obviously want talented people, and I have talented people, but those people skills and that trust is really what's key for me. And those are the people who really, they get along with everybody and build that team. And, it just makes a good environment, and the work's better, frankly.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up. You feel in today's world, I can imagine COVID's had an impact on everybody's hiring practices, but you would feel comfortable getting that from a video interview as well as you would have from an in-office interview, meaning if you were...
Absolutely.
Okay.
I done a few interviews recently, and I was a little skeptical. They were even just phone interviews, and I was a little concerned about what you just asked. Same thing applied.
Right.
Some you just click right away, and I feel like I know this person. I've talked to them for 2 minutes, and I feel like I know them, and I can hang out with them.
Right.
And some you just can't, and there's nothing wrong with that, But yeah, I'm finding the video or phone interviews are just as good as in person.
Chris, for you, a couple of questions about the career path within UX and UI. Could you talk a little bit about what a career path would look like from a boot camp scenario, as well as while people have time at home, are there resources that you would direct them to keep learning during this time?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I answer your question right. So are you asking for someone to kind of get started and get to kind of get the right skills to get into the field? Is that
started.
Okay. Yeah, I think getting experience, volunteering for projects, I've talked to some candidates trying to get in, that I think have been down the right path if they're going out and they're learning the skills through different, whether it's online certifications or other resources, but then they're also finding ways to put it to practice. So I've talked to people that are going out and talking to small businesses and volunteering to do a digital, a website, email campaign, social media for them, just to kind of start developing that process. And they've even gone through the due diligence of helping them come up with success metrics and doing research interviews and things so they're showing how their design process can be put to practice. And I think that's great to get just show some of that practical experience, because whether I'm hiring for an intern or someone more senior, I think it's always important to see how they've applied their skills to practice. So I think whether it's volunteering and getting that experience, or being able to get on the job experience and get that in a portfolio, I think is really key to be able to demonstrate your skills.
Really helpful. George, for you guys, I can only imagine the number of applications, resumes, and people that sort of attempt to contact you guys looking for opportunity. Are there 2 or 3 things that you have from an advice perspective for a job seeker in today's world that's more on the early stages of their career?
Yes, especially since we're talking about, especially on the design side, is even though we, at Hetty, we do overweight portfolio as a way to vet candidates, we want to hear about how you arrived at a specific design solution. So it's not, I think Nick alluded to this a little bit, which is it's not always about the strongest design aesthetic, even though that is super important. But walking us through how exactly you got to a solution and how you were able to sell that through to the client is as important. A shiny portfolio is great, but if it doesn't make it into the world, or didn't make it into the world because you weren't able to sell it through, it's not weighted as much, at least to us. I think a soft skill that we look for as well is just eagerness and curiosity. So, we can train for certain skill sets, right, at Hetty. So if you show a certain ability in one skill, and we know that we can train you up in others, and you are showing curiosity and eagerness for the role, You've, sent an authentic cover letter that speaks to exactly what we do, and and you've done the research on the role, or you've done a research on our portfolio. That's going to go a long way. So I would just advise folks to do your homework, number one. And number two is, don't forget about, solving for a business solution and how you did that through either design or some kind of product strategy if you're a product manager.
Very helpful. Thank you. Nick, I want to come back. You had talked a little bit and very eloquently about the interpersonal relationship once you get to sort of talk to someone, be it on the phone or in person or a video. If you had 3 or 4 resumes in front of you, which would be the first step to an interview,
Mm-hmm.
things that you look for in a resume that are like, I got to go talk to that person? Is part of it design thinking? Like, what are 2 or 3 key characteristics on the printed?
Yeah, let me tell you what I don't, and I think George just spoke to this, and I'll build on that. I don't like to see boilerplate, just the standard. And this is just me, okay? I mean, maybe others are different, but it's just that standard. If I could take whatever you're talking about yourself, I'm teamwork, responsibility, blah, blah, blah. And if I can take that and apply it to anybody's resume, that's not what I'm looking for. I want to know who you are, what makes you special. Like George said, do your homework. Show me that, what is special about you for this job? What makes you unique and a fit for this job? I would like to say that, George said eager, and I agree with eager. I totally agree with eager. You just don't want to seem desperate. And I think, Chris, you alluded to that as one of your career, I think, mistakes or, missteps that, eager makes me think you'll do anything to get this job. Like you just need a job. Well, not eager, but you don't want to seem desperate. So energy, bring the energy, but show me something and bring me something specific about you and what makes you unique. That's what I want to see on a resume, not the just standard boilerplate stuff.
Really helpful. I appreciate your answer there, George. I really appreciate your answer and the perspective on really how your thought process is when you got there versus just the finished product. We're getting short on time, so I'm going to sort of go around with probably one last question for each of you. Chris, there's a lot of conversation that goes on around new technologies, whether it's an application like TikTok or some new, I'll say, whiz-bang thing because I'm old and can use phrases. I want your thoughts on the next big thing versus consumers are still humans and we still react emotionally along prescribed traits. So better to pay more attention to the customer in its journey or the technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think both are important. I think it's important to look fast forward to emerging technologies because customers aren't always able to understand where they're going to go and how new technologies are going to meet their needs. So I think it's always good to do research that helps you really understand underlying what are they thinking and feeling, and really what are their goals, so you can kind of help as a practitioner make that leap between how would they adopt this technology? Is it really going to serve an unmet need that they have? Are we going to make their lives better with this technology? And if not, are there ways that we can modify this technology to better serve their needs? I think it's important to look at both because there can be emerging technologies that serve people in brand new ways, and it's really how companies can help differentiate themselves and make sure that they're staying ahead of the game. And so I think it's important to look at both and how those technologies can serve the customer.
Super helpful. Thank you very much. George, you had about as large a career pivot as anybody I know. Investment banking into the design development world.
Yep.
people have had a moment in their life now where we've had a moment to pause. We've had the opportunity to reevaluate career. One or two tips on your thought process in how you made the pivot and how you would encourage people who are thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, Adam, because it's easy to just get bogged down in what's going on around us. My career transition happened during the financial crisis, right? Which maybe not as bad as what's happening right now, but still pretty disruptive. And I was forced to sit down and say, what is happening in the world, right? I had to look at what I thought was the next 10 years, what the next 10 years were going to look like from a business standpoint, because I was very curious about business. And what I saw was, design sort of leading the way, right? I was inspired by what Apple was doing, and I was like, what is this design thing, right? I was used to looking at spreadsheets and evaluating a company that way, but there are other things that make a company go and that add value. So I was very curious about that aspect, right? And so I just started reading. I read books. I got very into Fast Company, and I just positioned my background in investment banking in a way that agencies would find that helpful, right? There weren't a lot of people, like you said, doing what I did within design. But at the end of the day, design is at least part the part that I was looking at was design builds business value. But you need to understand what the business is trying to do strategically. And that's what I was really good at. So it was a lot of research, and then also trying to spin your background in a way that is valuable for that next position that you're looking at, or that next industry you're looking to break into.
Thank you. What I really heard that was helpful for me is this concept of what skills do you have from your outgoing or your current career, and finding a new way to apply them to something
Absolutely.
that you're interested in. So really looking at the world of design and taking your analytical skill set in there and trying to prove value. Nick, last question of the day, and panelists, I so appreciate your time and your willingness to run late here and answer questions. You've had the unique opportunity to sit in-house and in the agency world, and you've managed creative teams in both environments. Could you just give us a couple of thoughts on why it's great to be a creative person in-house versus in the agency world, and the benefits and how cool that is, or not?
Yeah, I could talk an hour about that. In-house is you're in more control. In my, for me, I handle, my team is responsible for the brand guidelines and keeping things on brand. So, we have more control of yes or no, or this is how it should work. Where at an agency, I think, the client is right. Maybe you can push back, depends on the agency, but, in the agency world, you at the client's whim more. That could mean longer hours. That could mean you're kind of on call. You get that call at, 9:00 Sunday morning. Hey, we need something tomorrow or whatever. Where that doesn't happen in the corporate world. I mean, we work hard, but it's a little more structured. And that's not to say that the agency life is bad. That's just one of the things that I've seen. It's more structured internally. In the corporate world, your life, your career, everything is more structured. Where an agency, it's not nearly as structured. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right. So. Really, really insightful and helpful. Thank you. I like you've been on both sides in it. I hadn't thought about this concept of control before, but you're right. If you work for the brand, you're emotionally engaged with it. You have more control over it. You're clearly closer to the client, and there's a degree of emotional stability that I think comes from that. which for the most part allows for better work. It's a
Yep.
it's a sense of comfort where you're not trying to pitch your boss to pitch the account manager to pitch the client and relying on the client to make the decision.
Right. And maybe you're not, as a creative, maybe you're not even in the meeting. You know, you just, like you said, it's a telephone game, and then you're waiting for them to get back. How'd it go? And they didn't like it. Why? And they just didn't like it. You know,
Right. I'm not sure that Rita and Jackie will completely agree with the structured component being a part of my team, but I do think that constantly having a degree of chaos to promote creativity is not a bad thing. So George, Chris, Nick, I really sincerely appreciate your insights, your wisdom, your experience. I think we have one slide we can put up with some resources while we wrap up. Again, we will try to get to your questions after the fact and put them in a document that we will post. This is being recorded. You will get an email with a link. Probably will be Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning before you get it, but it will bring you back to this and along with some resources. Feel free to take a screenshot of the page that's up, or again, when you get an email from the recording of the webinar, this will be up there. Here are a variety of pieces of content that Creative Circle and the team there have created. So with that, we're going to wrap it up and thank everybody for their participation. Again, George, Chris, Nick, without you, we would not have had a great conversation today. And everybody stay healthy, stay safe, stay sheltered, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
sure.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.